Hi, this is J.Hamilton with Core Resonance. I want to welcome you to the next iteration of my video and associated newsletters. This particular newsletter is called Premise 6, which is the work of Dee Hock. Dee Hock's a very interesting figure. Most of you have probably never heard of him, but he's the founder of one of the largest corporations on the planet. And it's a very interesting story. Visa Corporation, or Visa Inc., or Visa International, which, by the way, has nothing to do with credit, extending credit, nothing to do with credit rates, nothing to do with interest, nothing to do with late fees. That's all the banks. The banks all have, they're the ones that issue the cards, but they're all done under the logo of Visa or, of course, MasterCard. And what Visa does is keep track of all of the spending all over the world and get it all back to the right bank and that type of thing. So what they are is a very large clearinghouse for transactions, to the point that I understand they're at about $125 trillion in sales a year. Now that is a vast number. $1 trillion. There's no such thing as, there really aren't $1,000 bills any longer, but $1,000 bills stacked up. 63 miles is how much $1 trillion is. And so when Visa does transactions in the amount of $125 trillion, that's a massive amount. 15 years ago, they were doing 4.4 trillion. And by the way, they had about 3,000 employees. And Visa Corporation comes from Bank Americard, which is the originator of the credit card concept, actually. Dee Hock took it over. He was 38 years old. It went from being Bank Americard, became, eventually the Visa card, or Visa. And what he did was he knew that there was a vast array of problems. That's why the thing had been a failure so far. And he also knew that the Newtonian top-down business model is an utter failure. In other words, corporations have CEOs, and under CEOs you have vice presidents, and on, down to the worker at the far end. And it's an abject failure of a model for business. That's one of the reasons we have so many problems in the world, is that we're using Newtonian, which is linear physics. 1 + 1 + 1 is 3, and this traditional model, and it doesn't work at all. And what Dee Hock did was he looked at nature, and he looked to nature to see how nature solved problems. And what he came up with was a model based on nature's capacity for evolution, its capacity for flexibility, its capacity for solving problems, its capacity for self-healing, and on and on. And believe it or not, that's what he infused into Visa. And Visa has grown and grown and grown. And basically, when I say it's a hands-off organization, I'm sure he's been away from it for a long time. But when he left, I don't know what year that was. He left when he was 55 years old. I would say it's been a good while now. In fact, he disappeared when he left. He installed a new CEO, and he disappeared. And it was 6 years later before anybody heard from him. And Visa was still growing at 20% a year, which all by itself is unheard of, 20% growth. Normally, a corporation has all kinds of dysfunction. Most corporations go out of business by a certain time as the dysfunction simply builds up. And of course, some companies are intended to be bankrupt and carry a lot of bills away with them while somebody breaks into profit somewhere. What happened with this was Dee Hock built in what I call nodal points. And what nodal points are is he infused innate intelligence into the fundamentals of the corporation so that it had flexibility, and among other things, it taught and encouraged all of the different levels of management to be, when I say on their own, they obviously were working within the confines of of the agreement what the purpose of the corporation was, but they were given a massive amount of flexibility, and the whole organization rose up and grew. And it is actually a benign organization that only tracks transactions. It does make money on these transactions, but it's small compared to what the banks earn. So what we have here is Dee Hock, who I have the highest regard for, by the way. And I'll tell you a really quick story. When I was writing Visionaries Thrive in All Times, it ended up being a massive project at 318 pages. I'd certainly never written a book before, and I had this strong impression that I needed to include the interview by Dee Hock, or with Dee Hock. It was Wired magazine back. Make sure it was Wired magazine. I think it was What is Enlightenment magazine back in 2002. I remember contacting them for permission to use this interview. And I have to say, I really didn't understand the interview, but there was just an insight, an intuitive insight that it had to be included in my book. And here we are all these many years later, and Dee Hock has a huge hint for how humanity is going to go forward. In other words, creating corporations and organizations, infusing innate intelligence into the very being, if you will, of the organization. I was mentioning how an important component of an organization is the human beings themselves, and they have to be taught how to think for themselves. They have to be taught how to be independent. They have to learn how to support the management above them, how to support the management below them. It's a whole entirely different type of thinking. And when this different type of non-linear thinking is brought into play, next thing you know, a corporation that's growing and growing and growing and growing, and it's also being of service at a massive level. In other words, you can go almost anywhere in the world and use a Visa card, whether it's a debit card or a credit card, and that transaction is tracked, and you have a certain kind of safety as you travel with this kind of spending money. And this is all the brainchild of Dee Hock. Now, the reason I mention him is because the sixth premise of core resonance colonies is about the idea that humans need to learn how to create organizations and infuse innate intelligence into the organizations, just like Dee Hock has done, but we have better tools now. In other words, you can use core resonance training, quiet the nervous system, quiet the brain, which quiets the mind, re-enable your natural state of connection with the cosmos, and become exponentially contributive. And if you can learn how to infuse that into a corporation, now you have entities that are doing your bidding that are in part managed by innate intelligence itself. See, right now what we have are corporations that are managed by what? Greed. That's it. Corporations are normally formed for self-interests. They're interested in profit. Yeah, they want to maybe get the milk delivered or whatever, but it isn't very long before that small company from many, many, many years ago gets bought up. And the whole thing is about stockholders. The whole thing is about profit, and quality goes out the window. In fact, we're coming to see life as being very cheap. Look at the pharmaceutical industry. I can tell you that the human beings and life is cheap, and that's all about profit. So what we have to do is we have to learn how to quiet our own inner nature. We do it through quieting the brain, quieting the nervous system, proprietary means of doing this. And in quieting the nervous system, we can re-enable our natural state of connection with the cosmos. The next best thing is to do it in small groups. That's what core resonance colonies is about: 6 people getting together, working with each other, quieting their nervous systems and their connection to the cosmos, and becoming a means for delivering solutions into this dimension. I might also add, premise 5 of the Maharishi effect is very much about how groups working together, meditators working together, can have a vast influence. You can go back to premise 5, but very quickly, 4,000 meditators descending on Washington, D.C. in 1993, dropped the serious homicide and rape and the whole 9 yards crime rate by 23%. And I will tell you that core resonance is much more powerful than traditional meditation. I've been meditating 40 years myself. And so what we want to do is we want to get individuals and then small groups, and that's what colony is about. It's like an outpost of setting up these, dotting the land with groups of 6 who meditate or use core resonance, re-enable their natural state of connection with the cosmos, and deliver and ground solutions into this dimension. Taproot is a variation on core resonance colonies. It uses the same 12 premises, and the idea is slightly different in that what we're after is intentional corporations, intentional communities, intentional school systems, intentional health systems, and on, where what we want to do is partner with innate intelligence in the growth of these organizations. Very similar to what Dee Hock did, but we have better tools now. So what Dee Hock represents is the possibility, and he's laid the groundwork. We've seen that it can be done. He is very clear about what he does. He calls it chaotic, and chaotic is nature's, what he calls nature's, how nature provides solutions. It's a combination of chaos and order. The human mind doesn't follow that very well. It's actually how the universe, how nature works, and he infused it into Visa International, and Visa International is growing with him long gone at 20% a year. That is a phenomenal, that's very unusual in the corporate world, extremely unusual. I'm doing with a very small staff of people. But even more importantly, he's providing a service. They take a little bit of money on each transaction, and what we need to do is learn how to do this for ourselves. We need to learn how to create corporations not for profit, but for providing services, and get about the business of bringing heaven to earth. I want to thank you for your time. Please read the article. Please give me some thumbs ups on YouTube and over on Facebook. And wishing you well. Namaste.